Live.
We are official live, Dr. Youssef.
Oh, that's great news, Izabela.
Hello, my beautiful friends. It's Izabela Lundberg here, the World Messenger, and I am zooming into Canada right now, Toronto, with my dear colleague and friend, Dr. Youssef here, with really super awesome topic and discussion. But before we go into what is going on, Dr. Youssef, in Toronto, I'm hearing you guys are into, again, a lockdown, and things are not as fun for you at the moment with spring coming and nice weather, yet you have a lot of restrictions. Could you please share a little bit about that?
Good afternoon, my dear friend Izabela, and and the audience, those who are watching us now, whether from Canada, Toronto, Ontario. We are in the third lockdown, facing the third wave of the COVID-19. The situation here, it's not as good as we wished for, and we're locked in our houses, offices, and we can go back and forth. Nobody stands this issue. And then we always go back to the topics that you love speaking about, Izabela, about leadership and action, and where do we, like, how do we make the right decisions, and how do we move forward, just keeping everything all together. And to our not so happy situation here, in February, all the experts and scientists has warned about the situation, and that if nothing would be done, we would have been in this cage again, and unfortunately, it is happening. So that's when leaders do not listen to science, and then look. Also, I'm not criticizing government, but what I'm saying is leaders in whatever positions they are. We always argue that evidence-based decisions, science is helpful. Science is not against, and it doesn't matter. Like although economy is very important for us, we preach for free market economy, but the base of economy, as we advocate always, are human beings. I mean, if you don't have consumers, if you don't have the customers, if you don't have employees. And some may argue, well, soon we won't have employees because we will rely on robots. Well, you know what? But okay, in order to assemble the robots, you need someone to do that, and or to maintain them, So human beings are still forever the most important element to every ecosystem, whether we're talking about social or whether we're talking about economic or business ecosystem. And sometimes leaders forget about this, and they look only through this materialistic lens. And then the catastrophe comes after, because the consequence is we don't have, our healthcare system is overwhelmed. ICUs, like, no place anymore. Transferring people back and forth over helicopter and so on. And the stress is, like, our heroes, or medical workers. I mean, they are healthcare workers. They are doing their best, but they're overwhelmed too. They're burned out. And it's really
we feel burned out. We feel burned out, and we have to step back and shift. Imagine how they do when they're constantly on the front line all the time, 24/7. Of course, they get a little bit of break, but that is not sufficient. And this is going for over a year.
For a year now. And the most striking thing is that we were talking about culture, and so people are so burned out, are so tired, and you see that they are.
We lost Dr. Youssef, so hopefully he will be joining us shortly, coming back. There we go.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yeah. So people are not respecting the measures. So people are hanging out, people are coming together, are meeting each other. That's complicated. I mean, even though if the leaders will make the right decision and follow the science, if the population does not respect anymore, what happened to society like this? And then we are on the brink of something very phenomenal, very interesting in political science. We see the rebellious are starting to surge, and then the type of ideologies we used to separate ideology both in two sides, right and left, and we have now tiny little people, like a small portion and the left, small portion on the right, and everybody else, they don't know where they are. I mean, it's just ideology is losing a lot of terrain nowadays, and leaders are very confused. It's really a chaotic situation, and I hope we get rid of this situation as soon as possible, Izabela. It's terrible.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, but again, I'm glad to hear that you're doing well, that training and everything you do as a faculty and through your virtual work continues. Adaptation that is being done doesn't miss the beat, and students and everybody else is getting great classes and great content to move forward. And this time, I guess we focus on what we can do, right?
Yeah.
So with that in mind, Dr. Youssef, we're seeing really interesting trends also happening and emerging. And this is something that we wanted to, beside our great passion for both of us about the leadership, during this Leadership Power Hour, to really address the role of artificial intelligence and machine learning, because we're also seeing how certain businesses are dominating and making such a thriving ecosystems. And what's the secret sauce? Obviously, beside quality leadership and great vision and great teams to make them happen. Just those two things that are so easy, right?
Yes, and it's. I wish it was so easy as some may imagine. I mean, we are living in liquid world, Izabela. It's time for us to redefine everything, especially after the pandemic. I mean, we reflected on things before we moved into this terrible situation. Humanity is, I think, a lot of intellectuals and philosophers and scientists and politicians and even ordinary people like us, they are rethinking their way of making things, how to lead, how to adapt, how to move forward. And even though you mentioned, like, I run the Chartered Institute of Marketing Management of Ontario, I try to lead it as a not-for-profit organization. At the same time that I am teaching and I'm a program coordinator as a faculty, and I have my students to care for and my classes and so on. And I was mentioning it's end of semester now. I mean, everybody is crazy burned and the final exams and so on, and capstones and all of those things all together. I stopped, and I needed to give a thought about moving forward, because although I am a tech guy, I'm an engineer by trade, marketer by profession, but an academic by accident. But I needed to stop, like to hit the brake and to reflect on how do we move forward given all of this adverse situation that we're facing, and what is the role of each and every element of that compose our society, including an element of my work. In a leadership position, or in a faculty position, or in a household position, how do we lead in this situation? Looking around while we were using technology, and I said, well, okay, it's amazing. Decision-making process. We have a lot of algorithms who support our decision-making process every time. And I said, well, that's interesting. And we've seen robotics serving in Amazon stores now, and
yes,
and we've seen robots becoming more and more influential in the workplace. I've started in the automobile industry, and then now we see robots even virtually speaking. So I said, well, how can you lead? What would be my role as a leader, given our whole experience? Through COVID-19, and with this technological development and all the situation that we're living as a society. So yesterday I was watching a seminar. General Petraeus. I'm sure that you are familiar with General David Petraeus, who was a great leader, military leader of the United States, and he was talking about leadership, Izabela, in difficult times. And I was listening to his words of wisdom, and here he said something that he found, and he quoted a commander in Iraq, like he visited his cabin, and he he got what was written on at the entry at the entry door of that the room of that commander. It says, in the absence of decision makers, make your decision and enforce strongly. That's what I understood. I mean, if there's no decision makers, there is no leader. In the absence of leadership,
step in. You can do it.
You can do it, right? Exactly. Be the leader. Be the leader. And I was thinking, how can I? What is my role as leader? What is the role of leaders? With all of these, shenanigans happening around. I mean, I'm sorry to describe it this way. It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on. Specifically in the last few years or so. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So lack of direction, lack of
integrity, transparency, honesty,
ethical
skill set, and ethics are the most glaring combination of all of it. You're spot on.
So you look at, like, amidst of this chaotic situation, and where you see technology taking a major role in the decision-making process, and I was watching a YouTube seminar that happened between Dr. Yuval Harari and Dr. David Kahneman, talking about the future of humanity and leadership and so on. And Yuval Harari mentioned that, so we may be facing the future having inorganic inorganic workers. And I said, what do you mean by inorganic workers? For heaven's sakes, explain this. And Dr. Daniel Kahneman, he was saying, well, I don't reflect about the future. I will still reflecting on human perspective, and the reality of the future is the future. But I mean, this perspective of having inorganic or robots, in the future, where and that's led to the question: what would be my role as leader if I have as led people robots? And Dr. Yuval Harari was saying, sometimes as a leader, what you would do in a banking system, for example, you will get your artificial intelligence, inorganic, advising you, saying, hey, the market is going to crush unless you make these decisions. And I said,
are you ready?
I got freaked out. I got freaked out, and I said, like, you mean we will be like controlled by this artificial reality? I said, no, we will be stupid, so we won't understand all the data and analyze all the data, and then you just need to acknowledge the decision that has been made by or recommendation. It's not a decision. You need to press the, and I thought, what if I lose this ability of pressing the button and saying, okay, what happens? Is there any leadership anymore? And this is a question that, although we're dragged by these conversations and the day-to-day stupidity, Izabela, I'm sorry to say that we're in a very informal conversation. The augmented stupidity has been so taking place in this world, and as you mentioned, I mean, the ethical framework that humanity spent thousands of years building on, whether we're talking about spirituality, whether we're talking about moral society, whatever we're talking about, all of these frameworks that were evolving as much as we evolve as civilization, they disappeared suddenly, or they are hidden somewhere, and we are all like crazily looking for them. Where are they?
Our behavior, our decision-making process proves over. And as somebody said, you can't fix the stupid. Reality is that people are numbing and detaching and not really spending effort and energy in things they need to. Specifically, if they're leading positions, they're responsible to lead and make a good decision. You cannot continue based on an old framework and old way of thinking. And behaviorally, we're seeing overwhelm even amongst the guys that are in the power, right? And have the opportunity to empower and make a good choices and decisions that are not. They're delaying, or they're making wrong ones, or they're just simply not taking in consideration full holistic picture. So I just want to say we're having a greeting from Nidal. Nidal, thank you so much for being with us. Appreciate your greeting. And he's joining us from New York City. And we also have Alessa. Thank you, Alessa, for joining us. And anybody else that wants to say hello and leave a comment, please feel free to do so. But with this discussion, Dr. Youssef, back to you in terms of decision making. What do you see some common patterns that are happening, and what are your suggestions how we can fix them?
Well, this is $1 million question, Izabela. I will join you in your legacy leaders.
Is growing. It's like
you know. But let me give you my 2 cents. And
please.
And I'm spending a lot of time thinking about this because, as I mentioned, I'm not afraid of evolution. I embrace evolution, and I think we are whether we're talking about the business ecosystem or we're talking about the natural ecosystem. We evolve, social ecosystem. Evolution is part of life, and then that's we need to embrace the new reality and adapt to it, as recommended by Darwin, right? And I am okay with that. The problem is, chaotic evolution, which is the wild evolution that is happening around without frameworks or following the same ways that we are used to or we understand. So what's happening in the decision-making process nowadays? Because of efficiency in the enterprise, whether we're talking about marketing or finance, whatever, we have surrounded ourselves with a lot of gadgets and softwares and applications that will help us to maximize the return over investment. And by maximization, we say efficiency, eliminate the human factor, bring more machines, and then they will help us to make the world a better place, which is not true at all. And the problem is, what happens is we are outsourcing our brain power and intuition to a third party that was created or programmed or initiated by other minds and following learning patterns that we normally may not agree with, and then they are deciding on our behalf. So what happens if you go to the bank asking for a loan today? Well, you go through the artificial intelligence analysis, and the human factor is just one tiny factor. And why is that? To minimize the risk, to maximize the return, and then you are and automation is like making the banking system impacting in terms of transformation, reducing their human factor in there, and everywhere else. You go to Amazon now; they have more robots in their warehouses, and robots do not get contaminated by COVID-19, so they are good. And you see robotics everywhere, and in the automobile industry, this revolution have been through. So how do we? These are the trends. Technology is taking over the decision-making process, or at least not. It would be strong to say taking over, but it's influencing the decision-making process, and to deepest extent that even investment. I have a software that I use, and then it gives me the hints of the day and the trends and what's going on. So artificial intelligence, it's giving me some hints, and my decision is being based on all of these information that I am getting from the artificial intelligence softwares, and I am starting to let my thinking be loose. What should I be focused on? I mean, so we outsource our intelligence to calculators long time ago. We don't make any arithmetics anymore. I mean, it's some zeros still, but every time we wanted to add 1 to 1, we go to our calculators, and 1 plus 1 is how much, and then that started happening with the mathematics. Now we're moving to the business world, the ecosystem. And we are relying every day more and more on algorithms to help us to decide. And my question to all of us leaders, what would be our role in this regard? So these are the trends, Izabela. Technology is coming heavily to maximize return over investment. It minimizing the human factor. So to avoid errors. And my fear is soon there's no need for leaders. Why leaders will be there first place?
I see a lot of interesting stuff here, and I think this is phenomenal discussion. And thank you, Dr. Youssef, for sharing that. And you spot on smartphones, smart devices, computerization, everything, and softwares and different systems. You spot on are like for right now. How many phone numbers do you remember truly that you know by
Even my wife, Izabela, sometimes.
If your phone get lost, and if you have one number to call, which number that would be, right? Do you know those numbers? I remember how many numbers we used to know by heart. And you spot on. Why did we practice and exercise how to solve complex mathematical solutions? Why we were also thinking about from chemistry, physics to whatever in our education system. But right now we're also seeing obviously some great opportunities where human error is minimized. So I see when it's complemented, right? When we complement something that can minimize our errors, such as in medicine and healthcare system, or let's say in education, or in manufacturing with precision that is required, versus when used to be the line of men and women working in manufacturing and creating a lot of errors, or getting injured, or repetitive types of roles where they do have a day-to-day operation that will
getting sick, Izabela, or getting sick like you have no right to get sick. You know?
True. Yes, and all of that, I can definitely see why we need it and why is this minimizing a lot of error when it's leveraged and utilized. For me, it's more about how we're using these technologies so that we're using them responsibly, and that we're not replacing still human intelligence and human factor, human capacity. And are we going to go to the extreme, right? For example, one example, we're seeing a lot, some healthcare institutions are using artificial intelligence to create complex scheduling based on algorithms and and as a result, they could not figure it out how many people they truly going to need, and in which role, and where they need the most coverage, and where they're having the most friction. And just the fact to agree or agree to disagree with other departments, or even within the same departments, was a huge issue. And some of those hospitals nailed it down by leveraging that and utilizing, and as a result had a phenomenal output. I remember seeing first time a demo on Tableau and Chrome and different graphics and different analytics, and how that integration really worked great. And as a leaders, how we received the summaries and reporting so that we can really anticipate what do we need, a more hiring, do we need a more supply, what type of supply, what do we need, right? So what do we need in order to serve the best with our organizations in our best roles and capacity? So those things really made it. But I also know that it's a lot of judgment, at work, because of it's so still new for so many organizations. It's still taboo because they're not leveraging and using it anything remotely. And I think it's a lot of this is scalable. Wouldn't you agree that everybody could benefit to some extent when it's leveraged and utilized for specifics as well as with responsibility? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, Izabela, I totally agree. I don't want to make the impression that or cause the impression that I am against technology. I am a technology guy.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, no, but I understand. Like what I understand as leaders. I mean, when we use the technology for the purpose of making the organization better, and when I say better, in a sense, serving the stakeholders, the shareholders. And by stakeholders, I mean employees too. So customers, suppliers, employees, and the shareholders, yes, they need to make their money. Now, as Professor Roger Martin wrote once at Harvard Business Review, he's from U.F.T., he's close here, what used to be Rotman's dean of Rotman Business School. And so he said, like, the focus, excess of focus on efficiency may take important elements out of our focus as an organization. and the mission and the value proposition of every organization. So this is a short-term orientation. A lot of CEOs come into the organization to prove their concept, and and then to grant the maximum return over the company's investment in them, and then they use technology to increase the values of their contributions in short term. The long term is problematic because you eliminate a lot of important, factors that the company needs to survive and for longevity. And so yes, technology, as you well put it, it's helpful as far as we know why it is there for, and how this technology would be benefiting the organization as a whole, including those who are part of this organization, and not by eliminating them as error factors or sick leave factor or cost factor. We look at the human. I'm against using the human as a human resources. Humans are not resources, and cannot be. That's my take on this. Even though I'm a marketer, so.
Yeah. It's a talent. It's a specific skill of talent.
Yeah,
that we don't have to worry about. That's going to be 100% replaced by. That is one of the top myths, that people think that artificial intelligence and machine learning actually will be replacing completely human beings and human touch, which I believe that actually will be increasing the jobs because they go hand in hand. They're not meant to be completely replacing positions and everything else. And I remember reading first-time Gartner report and on these barriers for adaptation, artificial learning and responsibility comes in. You're spot on. Leaders need to put a very big thinking hat and allocate the time to step back and really look at and be able to zoom in and be visionary and zoom in and to look at what's going to happen 10, 20 years from now, but also what's currently happening, how they're positioning for that success.
Yeah, and that's the point, because it's very selfish if we look in a short-term way and say, okay, how much am I going to give this organization or the shareholders of this organization, and how much am I getting from it? But what would be the impact of this business long-term, not only for the shareholders, but for the community, for the society, for the well-being of humanity? And this is something that needs to be well thought, because otherwise you make your, you get your package, and then what happens? They create short-term return over investment, but they create long-term problems too, because when they leave with their packages of and advantages and millions of dollars, they left behind a lot of issues that the future leaders need to solve. And sometimes technology would help, but most of the times does not. And you look, for example, the damage caused by Volkswagen, some of ill-informed leaders' decisions, unethical leaders, on cheating on on California's emissions measurement system, and then they cheated, and then they brought their diesel engine cars, and then the consequences on the brand were terrible, were terrific.
Yes,
they lost billions and billions of dollars.
And we see the 10 or fans that are being in existence over 100 and 150 years because of vaccination issues, because of corruption, as you mentioned, lack of ethics, but also the greed and financial misconduct, as well as many other misconducts that are still repeating and coming up. How do you treat your female versus male colleagues, and so much. So it is still old issues now on top of the new one. And you spot on, adding this additional layer of complexities. We also need to, as a leaders, step up and be able to lead by learning more, by positioning better, by having a right conversation, by challenging our way of thinking, by having the big round tables and having the stakeholders internally also be part of these decisions as well as conversations and part of solutions. And we're not seeing much of that. We're seeing very explosive, reactive way versus proactive, right? And one of the things that we're also seeing is lack of leverage and utilizing data, because data, if it's collected properly and now assessed, right, it's going to tell us a lot. But if we're not looking at the right data, if we're not asking right questions, we're not going to be able to come up with the right solution. If this current economical situation is over our heads, what's going to happen? Right? I mean, we see fragmentation already, and we're seeing very slow incremental progression, or mostly status quo, just that kind of survival mode. We're not seeing that progressive way of thinking as we would expect, because what? You have a resource, you have a people, you have a time, you have a reputation, you have opportunity. Where are the results? And why we're not seeing more of them?
And Izabela, and you nailed it in the head as well. I mean, data, I dare to say, very few CEOs, I don't have, like, I need to back with data. I don't have the research to support, but my perception, based on some that I know and I've talked to, is that most of them, they don't know how to handle data. And we go through this whole thing of outsourcing process to technology. And sometimes we don't know how to use technology properly, as you've pinpointed here. And we are not surrounded by the right people who would help us to interpret the technology. And most of the time we may incur into making bad decisions that will be causing damage, not only to the shareholders of the organizations, but the whole community as a whole. I was wondering what happened with the Purdue Pharmaceuticals, for example, when they decided that there were no addicting issues with the opioid. They were given to people as a pain relievers, and was that informed by science? And did they read the data as much as they needed to read, or did they understand the data? Where were the ethical and so on? And the consequences now that they are paying heavy and terrible price for that, and so society is too. So when you don't learn, when you don't know how to understand, how do you read the data, what to make sense of the data, which is not easy. You have artificial intelligence elements that can help you today, and you have people that are, we call them data analysts, that they are trained to do that. And then if you don't listen to them, then we have a problem here. So the ego sometimes in leadership is another major problem.
And I want to also just make a distinction here. We're having phenomenal leaders in organizations that are not leaders by title, but leaders by choice and leaders by skill. And they're phenomenal, yet underutilized and not part of these discussions. And then we're having top tier decision makers by title that should have a phenomenal skills in leadership and know how to lead not only organizations, but also team and talent, and they fall dramatically short. And right now, more than ever, I always provoke the thought of, if you're not having the capacity to lead, either step up or move away. It's not any other gray area in between. Taking space, taking that opportunity, sabotaging others that are more skill capable and able is absolutely ego tripping. And right now, people are calling for it. If you just go and look at a Glassdoor and some of the comments the current and past employer are mentioning about companies, just specifically United States, it will blow your mind to see how much not only endorsement of CEOs, as well endorsement of the management and overall leadership team it is, and what common pattern are. And all of them are related very, very closely, all about talent and human behaviors, human dynamics. And by now we should nail it. How do we interact? How do we work? What is appropriate and what is not? We should be able to really walk the talk on our values and be able to really work cohesively in high, diverse, integrated environments, but we're not. And that game is getting old. And that game is sabotaging everything else that we're talking about here. And you're spot on, because developing social skills, developing these, as we were talking before, Dr. Youssef, and both of us are very passionate emotional intelligence, right? That emotional capacity is being exceeded for so many leaders during this last year and a half, with the right reason. But also social capacity and understanding the social skills that they were lacking. How do you now, with limited social skills, emotional skills, as well as social emotional capacity, you really can then go into building and developing that. It's of the to start a trajectory for not harming what is see not only worse, but we're going to fall back so much behind because companies. I did actually a little survey. I had a presentation in 2019, and I remember I compared 2019 with 2009. What happened in 10 years, in a decade? Who was on the scale of Fortune 5, Fortune 10? Who started in 2009 and who ended up in 2019. Let alone if you wanted to look at in Fortune 20 or 30, let alone 500, how much change and shift happened, how many very well stable organizations are like even not anymore in even Fortune 500 ranking, because they did not, they get either too comfortable or leadership was leading same old way they were leading for decades and decades prior. And they were unwilling, as you said, ego tripping, unwilling to revisit what's missing, unwilling to let others to step in and do what they're capable of doing. And that is the saddest truth. We have smart, intelligent, yet underutilized people, right?
Yeah, and this is completely out of it's mishandled by a lot of us, and I say like a lot of people, because you don't see. I try to see or to give or to listen to my led people, and working in a not-for-profit organization, it's much more difficult than working in a for-profit organization, the .com and the .org environment, because you don't have the same level of resources. You don't have the same level of engagement because the economic incentive is very different, or it's not necessarily economic in my case. It needs to be social and so on. So if you don't identify those who are capable of leveraging the mission and vision of that organization, whether we're talking about for-profit or not for-profit, you failed as a leader. I mean, that's the first thing. And then second, going back to the point that you mentioned, Izabela, and I agree 100% about emotional intelligence and how leaders need to develop this capacity, is that we have a conflict in the economic space between two visions. And that's my observation. I didn't do any maybe I will reflect on this in the future, writing something about it. Herbert Simon's about bounded rationality and how decisions are made because they are convenient, and this optimal views of economics, where like, oh, we need to stress all the possibilities. We make the decision after stressing all the equations and the calculations, and then we always make the best decisions for the shareholders. And I stand with Herbert Simon, late Herbert Simon, because human behavior is it's dictated by bounded rationality. What is convenient for us? We don't need to have access to all the optimal data to decide on things, and that takes organizations to make bad decisions on leaders. So who is the leader who is convenient to the status quo? It's not the smartest, it's not the sharpest, it's not the most emotionally intelligent, but sometimes it's the stupidest one. And because, sorry, I mean,
no, you're right. You are right.
And you see the rise of celebrities like those who were in the States lately and in top positions and elsewhere, in my own country, Brazil, and elsewhere, who are making really bad decisions that are impacting not only their societies, their communities, but the well-being of humanity in general. And
Yes.
when you look around and say, but how did that happen? You will understand that we need us in the free market economy, we need to revisit Adam Smith, the first book, The Theory of Moral Sentiments, to give to that wonderful framework, capitalism, that needs to be well understood, that people still struggling to understand. Think capitalism is just taking advantage of others, and give it this moral framework to make sense to how can we benefit, yes, the shareholders and make them very happy, but how can we make people's life better? So we're talking about robots, for example, Izabela, and we're thinking from Western perspective. Like, go to sub-Saharan Africa. Like, those people who deliver Amazon products, they rely on that job. They need it for survival. What do they do after robots coming in? We make a lot of money, but what happened to them? So if we don't take into consideration those left behind or not included insofar in this major economic framework, this optimal framework that's still used in a lot of institutions on Wall Street and here in Bay Street in Canada. We call it Bay Street. You have Wall Street in the United States. We have Bay Street here in Canada, in Toronto. So I would call it emotional economic intelligence. Emotional economic intelligence, where you need to, look into these elements that make the ecosystem alive, not only your business ecosystem, but the ecosystem alive, and nurture it with all you can, taking into consideration the free market economy, capitalism that I stand for, and the interest of shareholders, but at the same time, being socially and environmentally responsible, because we want to stay here. We don't want to move to Mars. Like some millionaires are thinking of moving to Mars, and that's not an option for most of us. So it's easier to make this place a better place instead of, So you're right, Izabela. How can they, or these leaders, work on their economic emotional intelligence? I added an EEI to make sure that they are taking care of their shareholders, their stakeholders, and the ecosystem as a whole. And then that's what I consider the best equation to make business successful and leaders successful in their mission. Whether they rely on data but recognizing the human element, which I think it's fundamental.
I love that thought-provoking question, and you spot on. And if we do take care of this on planet Earth, we don't have to have a backup plan or plan B to worry about it, to move to the Mars and figure it out some other planetary world, because we have opportunity with technology and everything that we know to leverage that very, very effectively, right? And Ashish is also saying that technology should be always seen as a success enabler, as a catalyst, but so people will not compete with it. Yes, it's supposed to be a complement and agreed upon way of doing the business, as well as self-responsibility, because we're seeing also a lot of artificial intelligence, like if it goes too far and if it's not properly managed, if it's not used for proper reasons, like right now we're seeing some countries taking it to completely different level, where not only every movement is being monitored and managed beyond what is available and shared in your smartphone, how they can track you. I mean, we're seeing things that really take away not only our privacy, but our sense of our freedom. Right? We're seeing so many things that, again, depending upon which society or which model of society we're looking at, again, could help tremendously. Like we talk about precision in healthcare, precision in automotive industry, precision in very challenging environmental settings. How do we do mining, how we do explorations and exploitations of different land and soil, construction even, right? But then how do we do things in other parts of it that, again, ultimately we stand behind it and show and prove that our organization still run socially appropriate with high standards, right?
Yeah. And that's like, I sometimes I get myself thinking, it's just why, like, these things are so easy to see and understand. Like, why people don't see the obvious? And the obvious is just, people have different perspectives, and that's okay. But as far as we agree on a common framework towards moving forward, we do not need to agree that there's only one economic system. We do not need to agree that there's only one way of managing companies, but we need to agree that the direction should be one, and the direction is progressing this humanity and making this place a better place, because this is our house, and we need to care about, and we need to care for. And then if you use part of your house for business purposes and you do not develop it will be degrading your house, and then nothing will happen. That's on one side. On the other side, we are failing to recognize that we don't have a proper ethical framework to accommodate the evolution that we are witnessing with technology. So we're letting technology go, right? And then that's perfect. That's wonderful, as you mentioned, Izabela. Precisions in surgeries. A lot of things are happening in the mining industry. Wonderful things in the construction industry. Technology is wonderful. Robotics are amazing. As far as we keep that perspective very well honed into like an ethical framework that will not be controlling, but will be taking care of this healthy progress of the technology side by side by the progress of the humanity. And that's what we need to combine, because otherwise, what's going to happen? It will be we're losing control already in certain areas, and even corporations will faint because they are not following the proper framework, and then you see the backlashes. So it's incredible, this lack of notion about the importance of striking the balance between the interest that we should have as capitalistic society in pursuing revenues and profit, but at the same time weighing the balance with other necessities that are fundamental for the survival and the perennity of our business as an organization. And I see people like I don't get it. We have a lot of, you mentioned some companies that have been has disappeared. We in Canada have a couple of them. You remember BlackBerry, remember Northern Telecommunications, and because of lack of leadership and vision, unfortunately, these companies went bankrupt. And Bombardier is sometimes we have some critique on it. So the world is full of examples. The backyard business you look at the back and the history, and they see a lot of examples. The graveyard of industrial graveyard is full of examples. You look at how many industries, Kodak, and so.
True. Yes.
And some economists say, well, that's optimal views of economy because they did not survive the survival for the fittest. And I may say, well,
and what that truly means for the ones that they were willing to adopt, they're willing to question their decision making, they're willing to question their current state, that they were willing to question future state and expectations and anticipation of what's going to happen, right? Because we're seeing so much of that, and that is changing not only leadership, but it's truly changing also management. How do we manage, and how do we redefine how we manage people, how we do navigate these uncertain features of what is needed to be done with artificial intelligence or machine learning or whatever might be the case, because we're having this completely new cycles of new ways of experimentation. Some companies are easier to adopt to that because that's just their natural mindset. They're just the culture of people that are constantly challenging their way of thinking, and they want it to be more effective and better in their decision making. And we also have old school ones that don't want any change, and they don't want to question, and they want to continue to be authoritarian at the same time in order to just survive till their retirement or whatever might be the core objective and reason. Some companies, truly, when you look at, some guys are just thinking about it, when and how they're going to retire and what's their bonus and an opportunity be with that. They don't care what they could do right now so that company after they're gone can continue to survive and strive actually towards success. So one of the things I just want to mention this, Dr. Youssef, and I think it's really important to think about it, why we're doing what we're doing, right? We'll explore early what do we need to change and what type of change is the best suitable for industry, for the company, for the people that you already have. And then really figure out what that adaptation process look like and who is going to drive that, who is already maybe done that or who is already closest to that transformation that is required. Because right now, I just laugh when I see some jobs descriptions, and I'm sure you laugh too, when they're expecting for some brand new technologies we experienced 5, 10, 15, 20 years that they didn't even exist at that level previously. And it's like, how is it possible to be experiencing something that is absolutely brand new, right? Or it's never done before, but yet with the right framework of thinking, we lead towards that, right? And then as a result, I would say what I'm seeing is that creativity, collaboration, empathy, and judgment skills, those are the foundation to me, to leaders right now to undertake these ecosystems you're talking about.
Izabela, and you nailed, like you touched on something that's dear to me. You know that I am professor and I am program coordinator.
Yes.
And some of my graduates are coming back to me and saying, how can we afford to enter the job market if the company's requirements for entry level 3 years of experience? And so, like, you look and I look back at what happened to this socially responsible enterprise that wanted to educate generation and wanted to, you know, not to exploit, but to build capable citizenship and, yes, capitalism, healthy capitalism that will be bringing back the revenues to the shareholders. What's happened? What's going on? You know, and you look at all over these places, and you start to realize that there is something unhealthy happening to our ecosystem. And some historians may argue, well, this happens every cycle. But I say, okay, but guys, like, seriously, and we never learn from these cycles. I mean, what happened to the learning process as leaders?
I guess we like to run around the circles and repeat them many, many times.
Yeah. What's wrong with us?
What happens with the thought thinking and a true intelligence versus artificial intelligence? Yeah. No wonder we're experimenting with artificial intelligence at this point.
So, and this is what Dan, Professor Dan Kahneman, he said, well, if we still, like, we keep giving artificial intelligence the role that we are supposed to have, they, at some point, we may not be, any importance, and he's not the only one. I mean, it's just because he's a psychologist, as you know, and the human intuition and all of those things. I mean, we are giving up all of those things. We are outsourcing this. That's okay if you want to outsource some of the tasks to become much more intelligent. The problem is we're building machines that are being much more capable of reasoning in certain specializations that we are not, and then we keep giving up because we're lazy-minded. Our brain was wired to save energy. That's what Yuval Harari and the science is saying. So we are primate that we want to save some energy, and our brain does not want to spend. So every time we can spend, save energy and outsource, we would love to. And that's why, fake news goes like wildfire everywhere, because we trust the source and then we take it and then we pass it over and so on. So we need to have it to hit the brake, and then to stop and to rethink where are we going with humanity, with our businesses and everything else. Otherwise, it will be late, Izabela. And then this conscience of humans are, and I've heard that before. We are stupid. Well, really? Seriously?
Depends who you're talking to. I remember if I get heard that ethnic language. I mean, I would be multi-millionaire, which is, again, perception, what we chose to believe and what we think that we're capable or not capable. I guess in both instances, we're right. But it is also, as you said, the laziness and how we want to be served. And with the certain technology aspects of it, everything is available on fingertips right now for us. So we don't have to put a lot of efforts. I remember years and years ago, way before computers, going in library and searching and reading different books and figuring out about different languages and cultures, things right now that you can just easily Google and zoom in and will tell you not only historical, geographical events, but everything else you need to know. I mean, everything is now so quickly, easily accessible, but you're spot on. Who should we trust, and who do we trust in general as a source? And just for sake of it, Dr. Youssef, if you don't mind, I would love to really highlight 3 sources that I trust tremendously and use from my global business management perspective, from leadership. Obviously, one is the Harvard Business Review, and consistency, quality analysis and reporting. The other one is Gallup, that really helps specifically around human dynamics and everything related to people, statistics, everything more well-researched documentation there. And then, of course, I love to hear from Gartner, from technology space, because they produce very well integrated technology and people aspects of it, right? Yeah. So I'm just, those are the top 3 in my mind. If you don't mind sharing some of yours, if you have some others to add to it. But you spot on, we need to know where we observing information from, who is the source, is it trusted, and what do we do with that information? And now that we know, I mean, you can't just go back and forget you read it and then you forget about it, what's coming, and turn blind eye and hope that things going to slow down or happen after you retire in some other new generation or somebody else as a pain point or something for them to figure it out. It's a sense of urgency here for sure, but we're not seeing demonstrated to the level it should be. Wouldn't you agree with that?
I agree. A lot of companies, as you mentioned, going back to the first, I want to add MIT Sloan Management, review, which is, and then now they have one on technology. That is MIT is one of my main sources for information. Gallup, you mentioned, IDC and Gartner, and I use the World Economic Forum too. I think they have a lot of free source of information, because the problem to go to Gartner, you know how much expensive it is. I mean, there are what we call democratization of information is needed, and there are a lot of studies that are for free. Izabela, you go to Yale, they have Open Yale, and you can take some courses on ethics at Yale, at Princeton, at Harvard. I mean, technology has given us this wonder thing. I mean, it's amazing how much openness and democratization to the information and access to it. Leadership, as you mentioned. I mean, look at the sources here, and the continuity of leadership, and then the short-term orientation. How those leaders say, so after I retire, I don't care. And people, whatever they do. The problem is, 1, you did not prepare future leaders. 2, you probably, if you think this way, you are about to terminate like a legacy leadership for a business in the society. It's not only about the legacy leadership of people, but also how much important was that organization for the development of humanity. Like, take as an example IBM, take Microsoft, take all the General Electric, and so many wonderful businesses that. Siemens, the German one from you're European, so I'm Philips and all.
Yes. Yeah.
My God, like and you destroyed this legacy. Kodak, they destroyed it because of stupidity, lack of vision, leadership. I mean, they did not see that the thing that they invented.
Drive of prioritization, and honestly, just selfishly thinking about yourself versus future generation. And ironically, we have the generation that's going to continue after us.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a children, but so many do. And it's like, what are you preparing your children for?
Yeah.
What are you thinking they're going to encounter? What legacy they're going to be reminded of their father who was running as a CEO of the company, or someone in visible roles? What do you think the conversation is going to be 30, 40, 100 years from now? I mean, when even more reports and more analysis and more data will be actually shown, and where we can really see what occurred, like summary, like I was just mentioned to you earlier, 2019, we had the biggest exodus of CEOs in Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah.
And some of them were quote unquote volunteer exits, that they allowed them to give a notice, but majority, actually, even for those that were volunteer, there were all terminations because of lack of tolerance for specific behavior. And I'm talking about United States. So imagine how many of these companies started 2020, and what surprise they encounter when they start seeing on top of it in February or March of the COVID and magnitude it unfolded, because they already had a lot of bad apples. And why do we have a bad apples? With so much capable, smart, intelligent people, not only to lead, but to serve and find solution for complex issues.
Well, and Izabela, I have one tip that I would like to, if you don't mind.
Please, love to hear it.
Let ladies come in, for heaven's sakes. Like, do you think if we have ladies lead in the organizations as they do lead the society, and you think that we would be so concerned about things that we are discussing right now?
Absolutely not. And I'm with you. If we have a more diverse workforce, not only gender based, but also with skills and background to those expertise, we'll be absolutely having completely different outcomes and different conversations. I cannot agree more with you, Dr. Youssef, and not because I'm female, and not because this is advocacy for female leadership, but because we don't have even core C-suite members discussing certain topics and being around the table where they should be, unless I remember conversations like HR is very seldomly called unless it's a problem. They're never called in proactively, but yet everybody is screaming and yelling on HR is dysfunctional, we need to change. Yet if you're not having conversation and not setting out a clear expectations and not understanding why certain things can or cannot happen, then you're doing disservice to everybody else in your organization. The silo culture, dysfunctional culture, and to be honest, just looking what happened in the last year and a half, I read a report that less than 20%, I think it was about 15 or 18% of leaders in organizations were prepared to lead virtually. So that is the specific skill sets, right, that every leader needed to have very quickly to be able to lead effectively. And even a year later, they are not acquired that skill, that percentage in their own confidence on leading effectively. So imagine what that does to people and how that affects morale and performance. And no wonder we have the lowest performance and lowest engagement in century, specifically modern time, not because we're working virtually, not because we don't have a technology, but because we don't have a right ways of approaching it and integrating, and not right behavior. And we're not allowed in, again, right ways of doing it, because we're not allowed to fail or experiment, or not letting skilled people that are capable of doing that to show you what's possible.
Well, Izabela, I'm not pessimist. I'm an optimist. You know me, but sometimes I like looking at organizations all over the places. I mean, you mentioned diversity.
Yes.
And you talk to CEOs. You are in boardrooms, and I agree. It's not only gender, but I advocate for women in leadership. Why? Because they're not there. I mean, they're not allowed to. and unless we have
represented, you spot on. They're underrepresented, and a lot of times they're just as a first attempt of showing improvement, and that is very, very challenging in every single industry. Every single, in education space, in healthcare space. I mean, you can go in every single industry and look at, they're so heavily underrepresented.
So we need more of diversity. We need more of women in management, because that will bring certain balance to the way we look at the world. And by bringing the ladies element, the women element to leadership, I am talking about this equation that I mentioned before, the economic emotional intelligence, because they will take into consideration other interests that may be much more important for the survival of the organization in long term, and the society and the ecosystem and so on. So unfortunately, not all women, when they come to the leadership role, they incorporate the males sometimes position to just to fit the board, and I'm against
attributes that are being expected of them, and they have to act and be as a man. You spot on, because that's also culturally double standard. We will hire you, but yet we want to expect you to act and behave a certain way. So that is not diversity we're talking about.
No.
Diversity in thinking, diversity also of bringing different elements and giving that holistic solution. Because if it's a very myopic, we know what we have many pain points. And what we usually do when it gets so painful and we don't have absolutely any other choice, then we choose to make a decision and do change. That is forced change. That is not proactive. That is not well thought through. That is not effective, 99%. Because it is done with resistance, and obviously it's done with the wrong methods and wrong way and poor communication. And what happens, it derails everybody, because it's, again, lack of trust, lack of support, and things that should be very quick fix could be really taking much longer time. And right now we don't have much time, don't we?
No, well, we don't. We are losing time, and you see two currents, current of thoughts, I guess, if I can classify it this way, regarding the future of the enterprise and humanity. And one current of thought says what we were talking about, that the humanity or humans will still in control of the enterprise, and leadership will still a necessity. And the other current would say, would argue, no, technology will be taken over, and not far from now, because humans are not good decision makers by nature. And I believe in the first one, because I want to believe that we still have this capacity, not to shape the future, but to evolve with toward the future, to rise towards what's coming on, and to match. To meet the technological capabilities that are happening for benefiting the enterprise, and also the free economy, and also the society as a whole. And there's no contradiction in this. I don't know why people keep thinking that they are contradictory things. I don't understand that. I don't get it.
It's a perception also. Technology cannot run on itself. Yes, it can run if you turn on the power and turn on the technology, and can run on itself. Eventually will need overheat, eventually needs some parts to be managed, replaced, whatever type of robotic or artificial or machine learning concept we're talking about. But reality is this still needs the manpower in terms of what do we want to turn on, what we're going to turn off, what do we exactly need, how we want to extract, what are indicators, and will still require high level of thinking. And that is elevating the game. And one of the skill set for current leading with the current complexities. And when you add what future leadership skill sets are already being demanded in months and years to come, we need to quickly close the gap possible, so that even if we have phenomenal resources and a phenomenal technology to tell us and serve us and support us, if we're not using the most efficient way doesn't matter. We're going to still not be as effective as we can, and we're not going to make a strides in such an important, not only decision, but outputs as we can.
Yeah.
And that is the piece that I wanted to urge again. The sense of urgency is continue to learn, continue to question your decision-making process, why and how, and continue to surround yourself with extremely intelligent people. Make sure that you allow them to do their job and trust them that they can do it extremely well, and then see what's working and what you need to adjust. But you have to start with somewhere. And quicker and faster we start, as you know, more information data we'll have. We can be able to see this was completely failure, but at least gave us output, right, that we need. Let's now look at from different position. But if we even don't try and we don't try, judging progress of growth. Say, whenever we need leaders like yourself, Dr. Youssef, not only that is teaching other students and have sphere of influence in your circle, but also outside in the community and from portals like right now on this live that we're having, where we're really questioning what ecosystems we're belonging, what ecosystems we're together creating, and what ecosystems are we seeing that are just appalling and we don't want to be part of, right?
Yeah, and it's look, Izabela, I think it goes back to the quality of the individual at the end of the day, and looking inside us as leaders, and not checking against our egos and how beautiful we are, which we are all beautiful. The problem is how transformative we are, and how this beauty of us can make this planet, this world, this community, the enterprise that we want, the shareholders that we want to make happy, how can we transform this into something harmonious that can work well and progress well, evolve well, and there's no contradiction in being a good leader. As I said, I was listening to General Pacharias yesterday. Just such a wise leader, and he was saying, like, surrounding yourself by the most intelligent and capable people is one of the signs of leadership. And I said, well, everybody says exactly the same thing. Very few people do it, because
exactly. You know why? Fear factor, because that will be so glaringly obvious what they're not good at it, or because intimidation, and also worry. What if they get to in your thing, you business to leading again, challenge everyone else to lead.
And then how like and be human in a leadership role.
Absolutely. Still have those.
Humans make error. Human love. Humans sometimes reject, but reconcile. I mean, recognize your humanity as a leader, but don't become a robot. Because to lead people, so far, I hope we will be leading people for a long time still.
Be vulnerable, be absolutely. Replace human touch and human conditioning. Absolutely, where humanity is from that standpoint irreplaceable. So, Dr. Youssef, what will be in the last words in the closing for this powerful leadership power hour and sharing? When you look at about creating those phenomenal ecosystems, what would you recommend for audience that is watching and listening, and for the leaders that are struggling with this? What would be some words of comfort and some actionable things that they can take?
Well, the first thing, I mean, that comforts me, that we human, we are powerful, and we have survived so many waves of annihilation and problems that we faced all over the history of humanity for a long time. I don't believe that the machines will be taking over us. I believe that we don't know how to use them, and this is a problem that we need to figure out as leaders. And reaching the combination and the optimal combination that is bounded. I call bounded super rationality, where we combine the economic interest to the social interest, and we hone our capacity from technological standpoint and human standpoint to move forward towards building better, not processes, but better living organization. I mean, organization is a living being. We are the cells of this organization. I mean, every single person is a cell, is an element. It's an organ of this, and the customers and so on. So this is my view of organization, and adaptability needs to find the equilibrium or the balance between, you know, the tech factor, economic factor, but mostly like keep the human factor at the central of this element, and as far as we can keep this moving, I think we'll succeed in building a better ecosystem for us and for our customers and shareholders.
Fantastic. So guys, you have it. I hope that this helped you at least to scratch a little bit of surface. This is a very big topic and important conversation to have. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach directly to Dr. Youssef or myself. And I cannot thank you enough for taking opportunity midst
Izabela,
of games and hard before end of the school year.
Thank you very much, Izabela. It's always fun talking to you. It was very, very relaxing and informal conversation. Thank you to those who were in the audience and had the patience to listen to us. And it's always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Likewise.
Let's make the world a better place, as we always say.
Yes, and thank you for everybody showing up today, including Nidal, Ashish, Jeff, Mehmet, and many others. We look forward to future of your comments. And Dr. Youssef, stay well. I know it's not easy being in lockdown for third time in Canada right now, but hopefully this shall pass, and then everybody can enjoy more summer and beautiful weather to come. Okay?
Thank you very much, Izabela. It's the same to you as well. Take care.